Welcome to episode 68 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Breitman, back with you for another episode, Wednesday, May 10th. And this episode, we're going to talk about the top 5 transfers of the Steve Pikiell era. I thought it'd be a fun topic to go through, and let's just dive right into it. So, 10 transfers that I counted. I did, research, but I'm also middle aged now, juggling a career with 2 young kids. So I don't think I missed anyone, but if you find that I did, please be gentle in the comments. But let's go through it first. I'm not going to get to the top 5 yet. I want to talk about the other ones briefly. So you had first year, Candido Sa, big man, JUCO. Texas, I remember, was really in on him. It was a big win at the time. I like Candido Sa. And again, I'm not ordering these last 5. I don't want to do that. But Candido Sa, I thought was a useful bench big those first couple of years of the Pikiell era. You had Suf Mensah, who came in, didn't make much of an impact, left after 1 year. You also had recently Ralph Gonzalez Agee, 1 year. Had Ralph's corner, great guy, great teammate. Didn't make a huge impact on the court. And then you had Peter Kiss. Peter Kiss is the one I'll admit, like I had to go back and obviously I remember him, but that first season he made a bigger impact. He played more. That second season, 1920, Rutgers was better, and he was a classic case of um, the program getting more talent in and him losing playing time. And he went on to good things at Bryant. Was a big time scorer there. Went to the NCAA tournament, so good for him. But not a huge impact at Rutgers. And then the last one outside of the top 5 is Shaq Carter, who I really liked. JUCO big, one of the more sought after JUCO bigs the year he came out, and he was a key bench player for Rutgers. He gave them minutes off the bench. He was solid. His stats weren't super impressive, but he defended, he rebounded, he played a role. I really liked what he did in his time at Rutgers, but he did not make the top 5. So going to the top 5, starting with number 5, CJ Gettys. First season of Pikiell, 7-footer, 4-year career at UNC Wilmington. Classic culture guy that really helped Pikiell in year 1. His stats were, it's funny, he played the most and had the best stats of his career at Rutgers. He was, he was a part-time starter. He started half the games his last 2 years at Wilmington. But he only averaged about 5 points, 5 boards a game at Rutgers. 2016-2017 season, 7.7 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.2 assists, a little bit under a block. He shot 54% from the field. He was able to give them a lot offensively at times. All their Big Ten wins that year, he pretty much had double figures. He also, rebounded really well in those games. If you remember the Hartford buzzer beater, I was there for that game. That was very early on. That was the day after Thanksgiving, and that avoided a really bad loss. So that was a big moment for him. But for me, I remember specifically, I was at the Big Ten tournament that year in DC. And I was in the locker room after, and when they beat Ohio State, when they were the first number 14 seed to ever win in the Big Ten tournament, he was preaching. He was a big part of that locker room in believing they could get it done. I just remember him repeating, "Nobody believed we could do this. Nobody believed we could do it. We went out and we did it. We showed them." I mean, he was kind of the spokesman in that locker room after the game, that not only could they win that game as they did and prove people wrong, but they could win the next night. Didn't happen. But I just think that he was a big part of year 1 with Pikiell in terms of making small steps. I've talked about this with, other sports, other teams. There's certain things you have to kind of do that year 1 to build on it in the future. And he helped check some boxes off for sure. So I think that's a solid number 5 in terms of what he meant to the program as a transfer. Moving on, number 4, Andre Hyatt. Obviously, still going. He'll enter his 3rd season with Rutgers coming up. 2 years at LSU. He's battled injuries throughout. His first year at Rutgers, did not have as big of an impact as I kind of thought he would. He was a key rotational guy. Numbers wise, 4.3 points, 2.8 rebounds. Didn't shoot particularly well. But this past season, he was a key guy. He was, I thought at times the best 6 man in the Big Ten. He was instant offense at times. He is versatile in terms of who he can defend. I thought honestly his best game, and probably not, well, not statistically, but I thought the biggest game he had was at Wisconsin when Caleb was out last minute. Mag was already out for the season. I thought Hyatt in that game was just huge. He could be inconsistent at times. But last year, listen, 8.8 points, 3.9 rebounds off the bench, 31% from three, gave him 23 minutes. He could defend, he could rebound, he could score. I think that he is a really important piece moving forward. I think, it's going to be interesting to see what Pikiell does adding the next transfer to the mix, because I think Hyatt gives you versatility in terms of Mag coming back late potentially from his injury, in terms of Gavin Griffis, who I wrote about today, article on the ScarletFaithful.com, him easing in potentially as a freshman or hitting some road bumps. Hyatt is kind of the plug on for either of those guys that Rutgers needs. So I think he's very valuable. I think he's going to have his best year coming up, and I think he's the 4th best transfer so far in the Pikiell era. So now we move to the top 3. These next 2 and 3 for me definitely took some time to think about, and might be debated by you in terms of disagreeing on where they land. But I'm talking about Akwazi Yeboah and Jacob Young. That's who I think are the 2 and 3. I think it's very, very close. Both had a huge impact on the changing of the culture and turning Rutgers into a winner. Both of them had a huge impact in that. So Akwazi Yeboah was just 1 year, emerged as the starter kind of after Rutgers. They started 6 and 3. I'll never forget that Pitt game. They lost on the road, and the next morning was actually the Schiano press conference, and I remember seeing Pikiell there, and it was like 3 hours sleep, and that was kind of a time warp, if you remember, because that was 2019, 2020. Rutgers had not broken through yet. They had not had a winning record yet. They had not made the postseason yet, and they had a bad loss at Pitt. And I remember things being not tense is the wrong word, but maybe just people were unsure at that point. Were they going to have a better year? And Akwazi Yeboah, when he emerged in the role that he did and became that 5th starter for that team, things solidified. And obviously Pikiell had recruited him to Stony Brook, didn't coach him at Stony Brook, but Akwazi Yeboah was the glue of that team. I mean, his numbers, were they don't jump off the stat sheet, but they're solid. 9.8 points, 4.8 rebounds. I mean, he averaged 10 and 5. He shot 44%, 35% from 3, 44% from the field, 24 minutes. Played in pretty much every game. I mean, he was huge for that team. That was the breakthrough team for Steve Pikiell to get to those 20 wins. As we know, COVID canceled the NCAA tournament. A big what if, but he was, and I've had Gio and Ron on the podcast before. They've talked about how important he was to that team. Teammate of him and those guys was Jacob Young. So his first year with Rutgers was that 1920 team. He kind of struggled, I think, at times to find his role. But he didn't start one game that year. But 8.5 points off the bench, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, shot 41% from the floor, not great from 3-point range. But he had some big moments for that year. Those last two games of the season when they beat Maryland, who was ranked number 9 at the time, and then they went to Purdue and won that huge game at Mackey. He had that huge slam in that game. Excuse me. I can't remember if it was at the end of regulation or in overtime, but he had a big game there. He had a big game against Maryland at the rack. Um, you know, Jacob Young was a big moment guy. He loved big games. He rose to the occasion quite a bit. And then it was that second year that he really, he started almost every game, started 31 out of 35 games. He averaged, excuse me, that was, he averaged 20, started 20 out of 28 games. He ended up emerging the starter. And then if you remember, they were struggling. They were mired in that losing streak, and Pikiell actually took him out of the starting lineup. And then he, to his credit, was still very capable off the bench, and then ended up winning back his starting job. So, but he averaged 14.1 points, 3.4 assists, 2 rebounds. He shot much better that year, 47% from the field, 37% from three, 73% from the line. But he had some monster games that year. He obviously his skill set. The thing that I think is similar about Yeboah and Young is they each offered Rutgers a unique skill set in terms of what they had from other players. Nobody could do what Quasi Yeboah could do. Nobody could do what Jacob Young could do on either of those teams. Yeboah was able to do the little things. He was reliable. He really never made mistakes ever. He was able to defend multiple positions. He came up with some big rebounds. He was able to score inside. He could hit a three here and there. Nobody on that team could do that. And then Jacob Young, no one could penetrate like he could. No one could explode from baseline to baseline in terms of his ability to get up the floor on the break. He could break down point guards defensively. His on-ball defense at times was lights out. He was an energy guy. He gave them another gear. That Minnesota game was the best game of his career, I think, in Rutgers, and maybe his best college game ever. He scored 23 or 24 points. He had, 7 assists. He had 5 rebounds, 4 steals. I mean, he was all over the place, but he had the steal. If he doesn't make that steal in overtime, Rutgers probably, very likely loses that game. And that game was the game that they won to clinch their first NCAA tournament bid in 30 years. So that, for me, I think the fact that Young played 2 years, Yeboah only had 1, no fault to Yeboah. And that there was, I look at the Young moment against Minnesota similarly to the McConnell moment the following year when he got the insane block against Ohio State. That really did kind of save the season. If they lost that game, I don't think they make the NCAA tournament. So those two moments, to me, there's a parallel there in how it shaped the season. Obviously, different points of the season, not exactly the same. And obviously McConnell's not in the conversation as a 5-year player for Rutgers, not a transfer. But my point is Young's emergence that year, but also that moment, which really did help clinch an NCAA tournament bid. And he played well in the Clemson game. He had 13 points, 5 of 7 from the floor. That for me is the edge and puts Young at number 2, Yeboah at number 3. I thought about doing a tie, but I do think, Young having that extra year and having the year that he did that second year and how he won them some games, and then specifically the Minnesota moment, and then playing well in the NCAA tournament, I make Quasi Yeboah number 3, Jacob Young number 2. And then that leads us to the top one, and I'm sure you probably figured it out by now, but Cam Spencer. Cam Spencer is the top transfer of the Pikiell era, in my opinion. Listen, he had one of the best shooting performances in a season in program history. So I don't know how that doesn't win out. And I'm pulling up my article that I wrote about him. But he tied the 5th highest single season 3-point shooting percentage ever at Rutgers at 43.4%. Tied the great Donnell Lumpkin, who I grew up watching, and I've always loved great 3-point shooters. That's kind of my thing. I'm a wide receiver guy in football, and I'm a 3-point shooter guy in basketball, which was kind of my role in high school. Not that I played at a high level. But I love 3-point shooters. But Cam Spencer, what he did for 3-point range, 43.4%. On an identical 72 of 166 from the arc with Lumpkin, who, by the way, holds the best career mark in program history, career-wise, 41.8% from three. And then he also had the fifth best free throw shooting percentage in a single season, 89.4%. So those two facts alone, I think, put him ahead. And he was sandwiched in between Miles Mack, who is an underappreciated player that I want to talk about at some point this offseason, and try to have him on the podcast as well. But those two things, right? But then efficiency-wise, I was looking it up over the 7 years of Pikiell. No player under Pikiell has had the offensive rating that Cam Spencer's had. Nowhere close. He's at 119 for last season. He was ranked, I think, top 150 nationally. No one's. Cliff was close the year before at 115, but not nearly the volume or the overall production. And then you had some guys in the 110, 111 range, but Cam had the best offensive season of any offensive player in the Pikiell era, let alone transfer or not. So, and his averages, I don't mean he was the leading scorer or anything like that, but he averaged 13.2 points, 3.8 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 2 steals, shot 44% from the field, but 43% from 3-point range, 90% from free throw line. His defense was better than expected. He's a team first guy in terms of, even though he's a shooter, he got others involved. And, efficiency wise, I mean, he's off the charts in so many different categories. And the exciting thing about Cam Spencer is he's going to have a better year this year as he stays healthy. Now you've added, first of all, you're going to have Derek Simpson year 2. Derek Simpson year 1 and year 2 are going to be different players. And Rutgers didn't figure out Derek Simpson year 1 till the end. So you're going to have a true penetrator, a true creator on the offensive end in Simpson. Then you're going to have the same with Noah Fernandes, who is, more of a veteran. I think at this stage, better than Simpson, just in terms of his shot-making ability, his versatility offensively, and his just ability to get teammates involved. He's a great assist guy. So not only that factor, but you have two guys that can do this game, do a lot of the same things skill set wise that Cam Spencer didn't have for most of the year last year. And, the big criticism on Cam Spencer is he can't create his own shot. Well, he can to a degree, but yes, you're right. He's not a natural penetrator. He's not going to blow guys off the dribble his first step. He's a little slow, but I think he actually uses his body tremendously well, get into the paint, get into the rim. And he did that at times last year. But you're going to have Fernandes and Simpson now able to help with spacing, and find Spencer. Teams are not going to be able to. Teams are able to focus on Cam Spencer in a way I don't think they're going to be able to in year 2. And then you throw in Gavin Griffis, who's, he's arguably the best shooter in the 2023 class. I don't know if I can call him an elite shooter yet because he hasn't shot at the collegiate level. Cam Spencer's an elite shooter. Gavin Griffis has a chance to be an elite shooter too. At a minimum, he's a really good shooter. So you have, a shooter that's close to or potentially could be on par with Spencer. And you have Fernandes and Simpson. Obviously, all 4 of those guys probably aren't going to be on the floor at the same time. But you have multiple options now. So at some point, Spencer's going to be on the floor, probably 2 of them at all times. When, for a good part of last year, he had none of them. So Spencer's numbers are going to go up. He's going to, the defenses aren't going to be able to focus on him. He's going to get more open looks. He's going to be, he's savvy. I can't wait to see him play off the ball with Fernandes. I think the 2 of them are going to be great, a great combo. Simpson's going to be better. Paul Mulcahy comes back. If he plays more of a point forward role, how does that impact things? I think they're going to be more dynamic offensively. They're going to be harder to defend. They're going to be less predictable. And it's going to benefit a lights out shooter like Cam Spencer, the number 1 transfer of the Steve Pikiell era. I'll end it with that. Thank you for watching, listening. Check out thescarletfaithful.com. I have an article on Gavin Griffis. I have football recruiting stuff going on. Yesterday we had the women's basketball podcast. Tomorrow we'll have something else. And I will actually just end it on, this is my 8-year anniversary of covering Rutgers sports in terms of not being a fan. I've been a fan for 40 years, but for covering them for, SB Nation 8 years ago, now almost a year running my own site, owning my own site, thescarletfaithful.com. So just wanted to note that, and how much I've learned. And thank you to everyone who supported me along the way, read my stuff, watched my stuff, listened to my stuff. Really, really appreciate it, and hope you enjoy it in the future. And hope you enjoy this podcast. So talk to you tomorrow.